Good.
Yeah, Chris is our, what's your title? Deputy Planning and Zoning Officer?
Yes.
Steve.
Bill, you guys are now live.
Okay, great. All right, thanks, folks, for being available for our meeting tonight of the Forest Drive Eastport Sector Study Task Force. And what I'd like to do tonight is a couple of things. First of all, between the time we met last time and tonight, a number of you, I was not able to go, unfortunately, but a number of you attended a briefing at the City Office of Emergency Services. And that was requested for a number of reasons. First of all, to understand how they operate, but the concern was, or I guess the question was, to learn a little bit more about the planning for emergency services relative to mobility. People questioned, evacuation routes, and then if not just evacuation routes, what plans were in place or in the works related to major traffic jams on the Forest Drive sector. How does the county or the city coordinate in that type of scenario? So what I'd like to do first, and just briefly, is I don't see Camille on, who was kind of leading that group, but Lily, I know you attended, and I know Sally attended that. So Lily, can you give us just a brief overview as to what the briefing was, what you learned, and what remaining issues, or if any issues, still are present regarding emergency services and mobility?
Sure. I think we went into that meeting with two questions. One was, is the emergency management department part of the comprehensive planning? Are they evaluating new developments and commenting on development plans relative to their abilities for emergency response? And it did not, and Sally can clarify that. I think Director Simmons' answer was just that they will deal with the development as it comes. They aren't actively involved in the planning process. So that was one question. I think that was coming from Camille's group. It was very impressive presentation. I really thank everybody for getting that put together. Director Simmons is really looking at, and as you just went through an emergency just last week, you see he's doing large natural disasters, terrorist attacks, and things like that, and wholesale evacuation of the population, with sometimes a day or two, or possibly even 5 days of planning, the ability to do that. One of the other questions that I think several other of our task force committees had was more, and I think we might have been using the terminology incorrectly. So what we were really asking about is detours in the peninsula area when there's a major traffic accident or some other local disaster. I'm thinking about the BGE pole that fell down across Forest Drive, things of that nature that wouldn't qualify as a terrorist threat or a hurricane coming through. And how are those detour routes planned, coordinated with the county, that type of thing. And Director Simmons said that is not something that the emergency response department is looking at. That would come through the city's police department. And so he recommended that our task force talk to the new police chief. And he was encouraging. He said that the police chief is also concerned about the traffic congestion in the peninsula and has started thinking about other ways to deal with it. One suggestion was other crews coming and helping with detour efforts that would supplement the police, like public works staff might help if there was a traffic gridlock and helping people detour. We had long discussion on the complications of the fact that Waze, everybody's using Waze, so people take off into neighborhoods that might not have sidewalks, might not really be able to handle the traffic flow that comes. I don't think we clearly understood what we could do about that, but I think everybody recognized that as a current issue with gridlock problems down in the peninsula. And certainly Director Simmons agreed that there are unique challenges because it's a peninsula. He likened it to a funnel of traffic coming in through a funnel and trying to shoot out. And I thought that was very appropriate. So it was a great presentation. I think it, more than anything, just told us we need to go on to the police department, talk to them about how we can handle traffic detours for the traffic congestion and gridlock that we have. And so that is a different group than we imagined would be part of this.
Sally, is there anything you were there, anything you wanted to add to that?
I would just add that so there's a question about the evacuation routes, and he explained why they aren't public information for situations like terrorist attacks.
Right.
But they do have plans for every kind of natural and man-made disaster that could occur. And generally for evacuations, they're not really trying to move a lot of people. They're trying to move the fewest number of people, the smallest distance, which is something I hadn't heard before, but makes sense. So I thought that was it's all incident specific. There was someone from the county Department of Emergency Management as well. And she talked about how she coordinates with Kevin and vice versa. And then there was a lot of discussion about how the public finds out about things. And so I sent out that information about those alerts. Annapolis, and what's it called? Annapolis Prepared or Red Code Annapolis, something like that. I actually have it on my phone. And, but yeah, that I think a lot of what questions about, a traffic jam or a traffic accident and how that gets managed is a different discipline that is, traffic operations, traffic management. So, yep.
It sounded like, I'll call that detour management.
Yeah.
Sense is we're not talking about a major catastrophe. We're talking about an accident that backs traffic up 6 miles or something like that,
Exactly.
And I guess some people would think that's a catastrophe, but is it correct to understand that there's no real plan for detour management right now? And is it, if that's true, is it fair to say that is, at least as far as the recommendation concerns, something that the county and the city should coordinate or should look at? I mean, is that Is that a fair?
I don't know if that's the case. I think it probably, there's not exactly a plan because it depends on the situation, but I did go to this meeting that our regional MPO, the Baltimore Metropolitan Council, had a project looking at traffic operations and best management practices. So I think they have a collection of best management practices, and it has to do with like how quickly they can get the emergency vehicles off the road, how they, how they respond. And so I can try and find out more information about that, but I suspect whoever we find the contact of the police department to be is probably pretty knowledgeable about that and kind of how they do respond to situations.
Well, I mean, I can tell you because I Forest Drive several times a day and I'm caught in these traffic congestions and there is no coordination at the moment. You literally drive up to the accident and then there might be a couple people standing around pointing you away and everybody's trying to peel off however they found on Waze. So I do think that's probably an area that we could have a little more discussion with the police department and see what kind of recommendations could be made for coordinating that. I think what I've heard at residents meetings is more, could we, as you move down Aristide Allen into Annapolis Neck, Forest Drive, could there be areas where detours are picked up earlier and people are sent off a different way before they actually drive down to Chinkapin or so there's work to be done. I think there's some coordination to be done. There's electronic signage that might be useful. I think we just have to move on to the police department and see what they're saying about this.
Okay, and it sounds like the state, Sally, I guess, has guidelines or a template or recommendations, generic, that would address this kind of issue. Am I hearing that right?
It's actually our metropolitan planning organization,
Okay.
which is for the Baltimore region.
Okay.
I know they were looking at it. I imagine that these things exist in the world of traffic management. I just am not familiar with that world.
Can we learn something about that? I guess what I'm thinking is this: if there's a gap here where our task force could learn a little bit more, we're now focusing on detour. I'm going to call it detour management, not catastrophe management.
Right.
And if there are things that we could recommend that be pulled together or coordinated or in some way between the city, the county, the state, to some degree. I mean, we're not a body that can solve a problem. But we can recommend that here's an area that we ought to learn a little more about, and then maybe we can formulate a recommendation as to what is done in a coordinated manner to look at it. I guess I'm saying that much. Is that fair?
Sure, I'll reach out to the woman who I know at BMC who did the study or was managing the study.
Okay.
I think coordination has kind of been an ongoing theme for all of these different areas, and I think that's probably a big part of this.
Okay.
Coordinating among them.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a starting point here. I mean, a lot of people have thought about this, and tons of citizens have experienced the problem. So
yeah.
It's worth taking a closer look. Anybody else want to be heard on this particular question, issue, or anything else on this one? Okay. For the rest of our meeting, I'm happy to entertain any new ideas or new business, but I really would like to come back to some of the discussion we had in the last meeting, okay? And to set the stage for that, I think all of you hopefully have had, and other members of the task force that are not here, have had an opportunity to go into the Google Drive folders that have been set up for the task force and review what we're calling a draft report. So that was generated back in June as an initial draft. Since then, and prior to the last meeting, that document was subject to comment and edits. As you look at it, a number of the edits were entered by Sally, but we understand that those edits were the product of a number of people from both the county and the city. And Sally, I don't know if the state was involved or not, maybe, I don't know, but it was a group effort, if you will. That was,
Yep.
that
Michelle
was,
gave me comments
yeah,
as
Michelle,
well.
okay. So it was a group effort to address that initial document. And as you look at the document, you will see the edits were put in kind of a red line format, using the word document chronology. It's literally an edit and strikeouts and substitutions of words in the original draft, and all of them are designated. The ones that were put in by Sally and this group are designated when they were done. And these are done primarily in July the 10th. Okay, so from that, I added comments to the document where what I tried to do was to ask some questions. Number one, about some of the edits, and also identify where there were places where we are making recommendations, where the draft says we're making recommendations, but that I felt we needed to discuss those in more detail to determine whether we had a consensus as a task force or not in making those recommendations, because some of them clearly are policy statements, okay? All of this, recall, comes out of the work groups that we started with, okay? So when we first started this task force, all the material that we're working with came out of those 4 working groups as far as identifying issues and recommendations relative to the sector study. So I made some comments. Since then, and I'm just doing this by way of review because everybody can look at this and should look at this themselves. I see where Martha, well, I see Martha put in some additional comments and questions and edits, and also Lily and Camille. Camille asked a question about from group 3. She was the leader of group 3. She questioned why some of the work that they did was not in this draft or was somehow either deleted or modified or whatever. And I think Martha responded to that. So I'm not going through all of this in detail, okay? It's there to be seen. In fact, what I'm going to do is let me just put it up on a screen share so you can just see this real quickly, and then we'll take it off so you see what we're dealing with. This is the last rendition of the what I'm going to call the working draft. Okay, so hang on for just a minute. All right, I'm kind of in the middle of this document, but can everybody see that? Can anybody not see it? Let me ask it that way. Okay. I don't mean to make you dizzy by scrolling it. All right. I'm just putting this up because I want everybody to focus for the conversation tonight, focus on this process, okay? And some suggestions and decisions I think we need to make about how we use this, where do we go from here, how do we finalize our report, how do we reconcile either disagreements, if there are any, about what should be in the report, should not be in the report, any disagreements about positions that a recommendation takes on a matter of policy. How are those reconciled? Okay, would be another issue here. So I'm now going to take this off because I just wanted to illustrate what I'm talking about. And again, everybody has access to this and should keep up with it. Okay. So here's a question, and here's my suggestion, and here's a question, okay, for this group tonight that I'd like to talk about, and I'd like to come out of this meeting with some either consensus or decision as to how to proceed. Most of you, I hope, had an opportunity to read the email sent by Alderwoman Pindell Charles, Rhonda Pindell Charles. That went out 2 days ago and addressed the process that we're into right now in terms of finalizing the draft. She's not with us tonight, but I've talked to her about this. I think her email was very clear. Advice and some guidance and some reminders about, you know, what our job is. I think we are on track. What I would like to do procedurally at this point is to set meetings of the task force for, oh, okay, Sally, I see your hand. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. When did she send that email? Did everyone else get that? I don't remember.
Yeah, I think she sent it to everybody on the task force.
When did she send it?
I'd have to go back and look. I want to say 4 or 5 days ago. It's been pretty recent.
Allie, I'll send it to you. What email should I send to?
snash@annapolis.gov.
Okay, your work one. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Let me ask this. Did anybody else not see it or not get it? Or both? I guess if you didn't get it, you didn't see it. Okay, Claire? Okay. Brooks, did you see it?
Yes, I saw it. I got it up now. I was able to go over it earlier, so
Terrific.
we're good on my side.
Thank you. All right. Lily, can you send that to Claire as well while you're sending that out? Okay. Last time we met, we got into a conversation about, you know, we got a little bit, I think, into the weeds, but appropriately so, on the question of whether or not we needed to form a consensus on issues and positions or not, or could we? You know, did we need to form a consensus? Could we form a consensus? If we didn't have a consensus and we had legitimate disagreements, would there be a minority and a majority written position in the report in describing the differences? You know, we got into that kind of, you know, how do we manage that? A couple of the issues, but not all of them. Some are raised by the county agency or the city agency representatives who were saying, you know, we feel restrained, and I'm not trying to put words in people's mouths. I just heard it as, we feel restrained for very good reasons that we cannot take a position, say, on this point, or we can't publicly take a policy position that is different than the current policy that our agency operates under. You know, and I get it. I mean, that was and I think it's a very legitimate concern. So how do we deal with that? You know, that's a very legitimate conversation. Okay, that's a conversation that we have to have, because remember, what we're doing has never been done before. Okay, we've never had a citizen and multi-agency task force to deal with the kinds of questions we're talking about in the sector study, with the charge of issuing a report as to what changes and recommendations do we make to the City Council of the City of Annapolis. And so it's brand new territory as to how any type of group or task force like this actually operates. With that long-winded, and I hope not boring, preview, really what I'd like to do at this point is break into a work group, a smaller group, probably no more than 8 to 10 people. Half of which would be agency people representing the county, the city, and the state. Half of which would be citizen representatives, both from the city and the county, that we have on this task force. And that work group would meet weekly for an hour. The task force as a whole would meet every 3 weeks. So if I'm doing the math right, the work group meets at least twice before every general task group. And the goal is to get a smaller, concentrated group to start working on this report and sorting some things out for specific recommendations for the task force. The task force will have the ultimate responsibility of approving or not approving the report. There's no question about that. But I'm looking for a way to get the work done. And I'm going to be very candid about this. I see everybody that's on this screen is a worker bee. And there are a couple of worker bees that are not here tonight, okay? And then there are people who have maybe attended twice, if that, okay? They share responsibility. I'm not going to go any further into that. They were appointed by older people and others to be on this task force, but we're not at a point where we can just do a lot of catch up. You know, we've got the Google Drive, we've got a working draft, we've got issues. We need to resolve them. We need to get this done, okay? And so my recommendation to you all is, let's try a work group, smaller group, 1 hour a week, every week, pull the task force together every 3 weeks, have the smaller group produce something in advance of that general meeting that the task force can work with within the hour, hour and a half that we have set aside for these meetings, and get this draft completed. So let me shut up at this point and ask for comments, questions at all. Brooks, you go ahead first. Then
Yeah,
Claire.
so are we going to be doing this similar to when we broke in those original groups, where we give each work group another section and just iron out what specifically we're going to say based upon the current draft report?
Well, in my head, and it doesn't have to be this way, the short answer is no. Okay, it wouldn't be this work group if it's small. Okay, and I think if we're doing this by Zoom, we'd all be sitting around a table with this draft in front of us. Okay, we're going to be on Zoom with this draft in front of us. Okay, on a screen share. And we're going to go through, I still expect people from the task force to put their comments in, keep this current, suggested edits. It's a working document, okay? But the work group reviews that every week and starts distilling it down. Okay, it's going to be wordsmithing on this draft. Okay, taking into consideration what we're seeing and making decisions. Okay, making decisions that can be recommended to the task force, obviously, but it's it's hard to wordsmith with 8 people around the table, but I think it could be done. I think we're further along on this. Some of this, the wording and what people have put in is perfect. I mean, it's okay. I mean, it's good. We have the skeleton in place. Now we need to iron it out. So no, it's not going to be each person go away and come back to the small group. It's the small group doing it. If they have to do it line by line, paragraph by paragraph, that's fine. Claire, go ahead.
So yeah, so Bill, I think my comment is going to be a parallel suggestion.
Okay.
I appreciate what you are doing to try to get us to the finish line. And I think you're right that it's going to take some dedicated conversations between both our county, city, and state representatives and our citizens. But I think the one point that I wanted to make to the group tonight, and maybe a recommendation, would be within the report itself. There was comments about, is this a work group recommendation or a task group recommendation? And what I would propose is that we actually have a process where each work group votes for whether they approve the recommendations from the other work groups. So for example, you, me, and Sally were work group 4. I feel because we were so small and so tight, I think we generally all agreed with our recommendation. That's not probably an issue, but we 3 should be looking at the other recommendations from the other work groups and actually signaling, yes, we approve. And we could set this up in a Google Sheet and people could mark off, right, that they approve or not. And then we would identify where the issues are when some people don't agree. And then that could help guide the discussions of your smaller group to hone in on the things that really have to be ironed out. It's kind of creating some documentation and metrics to show, yes, this is where we have agreement, where we don't. And maybe it can help the massaging part that you're proposing with a smaller nucleus of people.
Okay. Anybody else on that, on Claire's suggestion or any other suggestions? Christina. And then Lily.
Hi, thank you very much. Obviously, I'm very new to your process. Our resources at the county, especially in the planning office right now, are very limited because we're in a very active stage of our GDP. One question that I have is, and I believe that what I heard is work groups are going to go back, write up, try and come to consensus within the smaller group, and then come back out to the bigger group. My question is, would it be better to come up with your bulleted list of what you want and then get agreement from the big group and then go back and write it? Because if you've put a lot of time into writing and then you have a lot of disagreement, you've wasted a lot of time. That's just an observation from a newbie right now.
Yeah, let me respond to that just for thought, and then Lily is next. I think that's a good point. At least in my head, the people that would be on this smaller drafting group, what do we want to call it, this work group, would be people that have either heard or themselves understand or be able to identify the issues. Okay, so let me be more specific about that. In other words, we've been meeting for a long time. We've put things in writing. We've worked in small groups. It's that we've heard a lot, and we've heard other people's positions as well. We still need to do that, but we have. the identification of issues, I think, can be distilled down in a smaller group because to some degree, these issues are already identified, okay, in the current document. If we missed one, 8 people from this task force representing the government agencies and the citizens could identify those issues. So here's what I'm saying. The idea of a yes or no vote, if you will, maybe that's not the right word, by people in the task force as a mechanism, is that a better way to go to identify things, or have 8 people spend an hour going through this line by line, identifying the issues, clarifications? They can always say, we can resolve this, or we can resolve it to the point of recommending it to the task group, task force, or we can't. I don't know the answer to that. I'm looking to spend the time tonight to figure out how to do this. I'm going to Lily and then Sally. Go ahead.
So the way where we are in the process before we were shut down was we started out with different work groups looking, and this is kind of to bring Christina up to speed, but also just to summarize where we hoped we would be at this point. We had the different work groups look at different areas of concern and come up with the recommendations and their own individual hierarchy for their recommendations. Like Claire said, the smaller groups were tight, my group was tight, and then each group had a set of recommendations and a relative order of what they thought the priorities were. And then each group came back to our task force and presented all of their recommendations. And we had just finished all that, and we were going to get to agreeing as a whole group when COVID hit. Something that we had talked about before COVID hit as what we would do as the next phase, and I don't know how we do that now, but I'm hearing some good ideas, there was concern. One thing that Claire's saying is our work group wants to weigh in on the other recommendations, and that's definitely why we had structured it so everybody would present, and then the whole task force the concept was to vote as an entire task force on the recommendations, up or down. Other comments were that some people felt that there were recommendations that had been overlooked by, even though there was a group on a subject matter, they felt very strongly that a recommendation should have been considered by that group. So this next meeting was supposed to be, and I know 1 or 2 people that wanted to present additional recommendations in different subject areas. They weren't on that work group, but they felt very strongly they wanted the task force to consider a recommendation. So I think what we had hoped was to move away from those work groups and finish the report as a unified task force looking through each recommendation. And whether we do that as a Google Doc vote at this point, what I see right now is that I think a small group could clean up these recommendations a little so it's easier for everybody to digest and keep working on formatting, so everything, there's some similarity in the formatting, so it's clear what we're doing. That I just wanted to explain kind of where we had hoped to take the process pre-COVID.
Sally, go ahead.
I think I did get your email, Lily. Thank you. I'm not sure if you mean the formatting for the group's recommendations, because I feel like the work of the work groups was, in my mind, not quite finished. Like we were almost finished, but so I kind of like Claire's idea, because I don't want to recreate the wheel. I just feel like we need to finish what the work groups were doing, make sure the other groups understand the thought process of each work group, because there's a lot of recommendations in the Google Doc that I don't think we discussed as a group. So I'm not sure how we can evaluate them if we don't really understand them. And
Okay.
and the matrix might help just clarify what we agree on and what we don't agree on.
Okay, Patrick, but I have a question before, Patrick, before you go. So Sally, just so I'm understanding the logistics of what I hear what you're saying. Would you send this back to the groups for clarification and then questions by other persons, which is, I'm just thinking of the logistics of that. Or work off, when you say work off a matrix, what's that? What's that going to look like?
Well, that's what Claire was talking about. Now, I think first would be the work groups to meet one more time, go over the Google Doc and their original recommendations, make sure everything is represented how they want it in the Google Doc from their recommendations. And
All right,
then figure out one of the group members to present their recommendations to a big meeting.
Okay.
And speak to the Google Doc so we can start finalizing that.
Okay, so let me break that down. And Claire, is this consistent with what you were thinking as well, in terms of?
So I was just thinking that we could have a document where we each voted on the recommendations proposed by the other team. I am open to whatever other steps need to be done to get to that point, but I just think for the record, it would be good for us to have documented that, yes, we all blessed this above and beyond finalizing a document.
Oh, maybe we could have like a, I agree, I don't agree, I need more information matrix. And then we could narrow down what we need to talk about that we have covered as a group.
Yeah, we thought about that. We talked about that a little bit last time, but I'm hearing this part of have the groups go back, which can be done. I mean, we don't need a meeting for that.
I don't think we need to go back to the groups. I think we just need to document in a Google Sheet all these recommendations and have people, as Sally nicely articulated, agree, agree, not agree, or need more information. And then that can help guide Bill the process that you're talking about. That's what I would propose. Your proposal of a small working group would just have the information from the broader task force on issues.
Okay.
That makes sense.
So and not forgetting you, Patrick, I'm going to come back to you. I got you covered. Okay. But I want to be clear about Sally. I thought I heard you saying something like, well, these 4 groups need to go back and make sure, or at least validate what they've already done. Am I hearing that right?
Well, I thought I heard you say, or Lily say, some people felt like some of the recommendations from that part hadn't got into the Google Doc. Is that right?
That's true.
Okay, I hadn't heard that, but if that is the case, then
they need to do something about that.
And there are also people that were not in a small group, but so you had to choose a subject area. And so your greater input in this first phase of the task force was to the subject matter within your work group. But there were task force members that wanted to comment on other parts of the sector study. They weren't in that small group, and they want to have an opportunity to make suggestions or bring up things that had been overlooked by that small group. So we had envisioned that after everybody had done their presentations, we would have an opportunity to let the task force in general comment on each of these subject areas. For instance, we did process. If somebody had a totally different recommendation for a new public participation process model, we would have a point in time when they could offer that, and we'd start thinking about that.
Okay, Patrick, go ahead.
Kind of tagging some of the discussion of that Sally was giving. I wonder too if I know there have been some talk about having some additional presentations that discuss some of the information. I'm wondering if things like community benefit agreements or the principles or sorts of things are things the group might benefit from getting a little bit more information from folks that know a little bit more about that. The way that we all attended a presentation on form-based zoning that I think helped everybody sort of get a little bit more up to speed on what that is. There may be some other concepts, these recommendations we could benefit from a little bit more information on.
Yeah. Let me just say, you mentioned community benefit agreements, just so you know. There is a coalition of civic associations that has been meeting regularly and are now working on a concept memorandum on community benefit agreements to be used in Annapolis as a concept. That memorandum is in its third draft. It came to me today, and it'll be people were talking about CBAs and planning and zoning, and other people will get copies of that probably in another week to 10 days. Okay, so that's coming. And it's a 2-page, 3-page document that spells it out. A lot of people worked on it in terms of how it might be used. So it's really a concept memorandum as opposed for discussion. But
Bill, will that be task force?
I'm sorry, what?
Will that concept memorandum be shared with the task force?
Yes, it will. Yes.
Okay.
So you all are on the list. Okay. But let me, somebody else had their hand up, maybe not. Just tying together where we are and logistically thinking this through. Let's say we have another task force meeting in 3 weeks, okay? Between now and then, I'm going to encourage everybody. I'll send an email out. The groups can meet separately if they want, however they want to do it. But all the members of the task force needs to look at this, look at the documents that have already been posted, and look at the latest draft. Okay. I'm just calling it the latest draft. It's the working document, if you will. And it's going to be important to say to people, look, if you got something to say about it, put it in there. If you have a question, put it in there. If you think something's missing, put it in there. Okay. If you don't agree with something, you got to say it. Okay. Own it. But then I'm hearing we tease out, I guess, the recommendations and put that in some kind of a, for lack of a better term, poll or matrix, which allows all of our members on the task force to say agree or disagree or abstain, whatever, or need more information, whatever. Okay. And then we share the results of that. I'm just trying to figure out how to get it done. So is that what we're talking about? I mean, is that what it looks like? Anybody?
Yes, I think you've described what I wanted to have happen. Thank
Sally,
you.
okay. And Sally, is that comport with what you were thinking?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay. My confession is I have absolutely no idea how to set up a Google matrix. Okay, but that's the least of our problems, I suppose. I'll hire a 10-year-old to figure it out.
I can help you with that, Bill.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, and we started with a matrix. Remember the first universe of all of our recommendations. We put it on a matrix. We referenced parts of the
All right.
original study.
Okay. I would like to have everybody see this matrix and respond to it before the next meeting. Okay. So 3 weeks down the road, we're in literally the end of August, first week of September. Okay. That sounds like a plan. Anybody want to add to that, make additional suggestions to that?
I just have a question, Bill.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, we've spent an enormous amount of time, you know, putting this present document together.
Right.
We've given people numerous opportunities to edit it, add to it, do whatever they want to do to it. When you say a matrix, are you talking about pulling from that existing document and putting things into some kind of a chart format?
Well, let me give you an example of what I'm thinking, and let's test that against some of the people who were this idea came from this meeting. So I don't speak up or yell up if I'm not getting this right. But step one, look at the document. Everybody, look at the document, make edits, make comments, whatever you're going to do. Okay. Then I will, along with, and I'm going to ask other people to help me with this, but Sally's going to help me with the matrix or even how to do it, how to set it up. But pulling things out, if the first 3 paragraphs, there's not a single comment other than great, looks good, all of that, we don't need to go there, okay? But when we get into the substance of the recommendation,
Okay.
then I have to pull the wording out of, or consolidate the wording of what we see in the document, put that as a line item. I agree with that. That's acceptable to me. I agree with that statement. I agree with that position. I agree with that recommendation. Okay.
So are you saying that people aren't able to do that with the format that it's presently in? I mean, if somebody had a comment about a particular statement there, they do have the opportunity to say they like it or don't like it now. I'm just trying to think of, we started with, you know, a chart and columns, and then we went to a different format where it's a narrative. Now we're going to go to another chart.
Yeah, but I'm trying to think of a process. This is a process to get this thing done. Okay. And let me give you a hypothetical. You're right. I mean, you and other people, everybody has done a lot of work on this. But if there is a policy position in there that, let's say on a matrix, okay, we put a statement, it comes out of a group, okay, and 60% of our task force says, I agree with that, and 40% says, I disagree with that. It shouldn't be in the report, okay? Then that has to be reconciled in a meeting. That has to be, I have to, in a meeting, when everybody's read this, the people who took those positions, we have to reconcile that. We either reach a consensus on that point, or we don't, or we have a minority opinion, or whatever we have, okay? But that has to be reconciled for purposes of the report, okay? If I have 10 people or 19 people agree with a statement of fact and a recommendation, and one person says, no, I disagree with it, and I can read, everybody else can read, you know, who that is, hopefully, or on the matrix. In the meeting, that person's going to have to stand up and defend the position. And if nobody's persuaded, move on.
Right. I totally understand that part. I'm struggling with the time that it takes to be in this format, go to another format. Now we're going to another format.
I know, but you know, that's where we are, and given the logistical challenges of this.
I don't see it as the final format. I thought the spreadsheet or worksheet would be more just so ease of use for voting. It doesn't take the place of the report.
That's the way I'm hearing it too. Clara, go ahead on that point.
This spreadsheet should not be very hard to put together, and I will also help to do it. It really is just the specific recommendations and all of the task force members along, or they agree, disagree, uncertainty, and then we have people voting. I mean, it was not meant to replace anything, but it was meant to address one of the challenges we have in the report right now, is that the edits have now said that the recommendations are just work group recommendations. It's not a task force recommendation.
Right. We have
So
to make the leap.
have a way to get it to be the task force recommendation. That's it.
Correct. Either yes or no. I mean, right. That's right. Eric.
There are certain areas though that the task force hasn't had a chance, and I probably missed this. I apologize for being late today. Where we're recommending the peninsula thing, but yet we haven't had an open conversation about it yet. And, you know, those types of things. So how many explanations or how many things should we have before we go to the voting stage?
Well, why, you know, using the matrix, I'm thinking, Camille, let's take two things. One, the peninsula principles, okay, which by the way are posted in the Google Drive.
Right. I
for
saw them.
everybody to read. But you're right. I mean, maybe what we need is, you know, to spend a part of a meeting conversing about that. Also, the concept of community benefit agreements.
Right. Because we haven't had it yet.
Correct. But I think that if we work with the matrix that's being described, that'll pop up as something we should then, you know, before we
Vote on it.
Vote, or yeah, I mean, people will say, I don't know enough about this.
Right.
Or, you know,
Right.
and then we spend time, but we do know enough about other things. Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to share, you know, like Christina, a perspective of someone who's pretty new to this group, but this is just the second meeting I've been a part of. You know, I think to me, it makes total sense to kind of consolidate your recommendations into a chart form that is straightforward and easy for the entire task force to digest. You know, because my concern is, as I access the Google document, which is a great tool for collaboration and for recording versions and comments over time, it is a challenging document to get through with all the comments that are in there right now. And imagine if everybody on the task force was adding comments. It would be a very unwieldy document to get through. So I think you guys have made an incredible amount of progress on this report, that it's a significant document. I would just ask that, and I don't see the core, I'm not, you know, because I'm not technically a part of the group, I don't see the correspondence with the task force, but I would just ask that, you know, perhaps you clean that you accept maybe the comments that are in there, or the version, and share a clean version with the task force that people can kind of digest with this chart of, you know, simplified chart of the recommendations, and then maybe your document is the reference. So if somebody has a question about one of the recommendations, they refer back to the document, but that these are, you know, just more accessible documents for the whole group. Maybe that's just my perspective on it.
Okay, good, great. Anybody else on this process?
So again, so I just want to, I guess, reiterate that. So when we go through this process, right, of the, you know, the matrix that we're going to create, and kind of identifying, you know, who on the task force, I think in some kind of way, hopefully, you know, when we get to those very sensitive areas that, you know, and I think you kind of touched on it a little bit, so that we, you know, we we as a part of the task force, as the county staff or state staff or city staff, are not kind of put into those tough situations of making policy-based decisions. I'm assuming that it will have something set up for us in that way.
Well, let me just tell you a quick thing. And, again, we can, once we form this matrix, which is, forming the matrix, identifying the recommendations in the matrix, giving people an opportunity through the matrix to say, agreed, disagree, abstain, need more information. I don't know. We'll have some ways to respond. Okay. It seems to me, Raymond, that some of those recommendations are sensitive. Some of them are going to be sensitive. Okay. They are policy statements. Okay. Which may be different than current policy. Okay. We're actually recommending change of policy, perhaps. I don't know. Okay. In a recommendation, there are a number of them that are. They're clearly recommending changes of policy. I think it's fair to, first of all, identify those, give everybody an opportunity to respond to those, and then I think the very legitimate concerns of county, perhaps city staff and agency staff need to be taken into account. How do we deal with it? How do they abstain? Do they make a different statement? Do we have a statement say that they, whatever? I want to be open and honest about it and transparent. But I think we can do it. I think we need to start getting into it, I guess is what I'm saying.
No, I totally agree. And I think for the small group, like you said, you're gonna have 3, I guess, that are city county residents, and then some of the, I guess, the support, I'm saying support staff, but the county, city, and state staff that have been a part of the task force. And I think that will be good. I think one other thing or question or just kind of and maybe it's been put out there, but maybe another thing just to kind of send to the group, just to kind of have a recollection as we go through this part of the process, is what were the identified issues, concerns, or problems that were associated with the Forest Drive sector study that kind of stopped it from moving forward, right? Because ultimately, with all the work groups and all the work that we all are doing, that you all are doing, is great, but the focus goal there is to make sure that we are addressing what those issues are so that it could move towards study. And so I think, with a lot of this, that'll probably help, right? Because, from what the task force or what the task groups came up with, it was about, hey, okay, well, how do we address said issues?
It's almost like going through a checklist and to see if we addressed all those different issues that were not enough information, or they didn't like what it said, or whatever it might be, which we did come up with. I did a draft of a list, and we could certainly add to it or do whatever, but it's like a checklist to make sure that we've addressed everything that we believe people had an issue with.
And for full disclosure, I got that from Camille.
Get that back out to everybody.
So that was something that Camille did in our task force. So that was kind of where it came from. That's kind of how we started to identify what the issues were in task group 3.
Okay, good.
Yeah, that might be good to have it in the Google document for, like in the introduction or, something like that.
Say that again. I didn't catch.
It just might be good for city council to see, like, here are the issues that were identified with the sector study, and here's how we address them.
Yeah.
Right.
I actually rewrote the introduction to do that, to point out what the issues were and tried to condense. I might send that out next week just to look at, just kind of introducing why the sector, why this task force was even formed. There were some very specific concerns that citizens groups had with the study moving forward until certain issues were addressed. And I think that we could put that in bullet form and just introduce that. That helps go back to that checklist idea of, did we circle back and actually meet the needs of the residents that testified?
Yeah, the checklist that I had, I went through the Eastport recommendation, what they put together, and
Yep.
there were a few others, but you could take that and see if there's any that I might have left out, and make sure it's complete. And I think it's good that we do that, really.
Great. I'll put my draft out on the Google Drive.
Any other thoughts about this? Okay. Let me just reiterate what I think is the very next step, if I could. I'm going to ask Sally and Camille and Claire and Lily to come up with a format for the matrix. Okay. And
may I call you back in about
can you all do that?
15 minutes?
I'm just trying to think of, can we get started with a format? Sally, I think you have a format, or I'm not asking you to do something.
Oh.
Okay.
I don't have one, but I can make one.
Well, I can't. So, and I admit it. Okay, will you please make one and coordinate with Camille, who's good at it too, and Lily, can you participate in that as well, because you've got some stuff you wanted to add, and Camille has a checklist that could start this ball rolling a little bit, and then we could add to it. And Claire, you're welcome to participate in that. So if the four of you, I guess, could communicate, Sally's going to get the ball rolling with a format. Camille, Lily, and Claire will then review and start refining that a little bit, putting in issues. Please copy me on your correspondence so I can see how that's developing. And the goal is within the next 3 weeks, okay, let's see if we can plug in, using what we've got, let's see if we can plug in the issues, the recommendations into that matrix that we can send out to the task force for input and discussion by the next meeting, which is in about 3 weeks. And maybe, well, let's just see how far we can get, okay, with that. We may need another meeting to talk about formatting or how you participate in that or what you do or don't do. And I've got to goose a couple of people who have not participated to bring them up to speed and say, look, you're either going to participate in the matrix or you're not, but this is what we're doing to move this project ahead. So that's my job. Is that a fair way to go? Is that the next step?
So do you want the four of us to get together on a call and try to figure out how we're gonna?
However you want to do it.
this?
It sounds to me like Sally knows how to put a matrix together, which is, I mean, that to me, that's just, how do you put the format together so you can input the data? Is that, am I right, Sally? Is that what that is?
Yeah, Camille, I can just try to put something together and send it to you for comments. And if, I mostly got it, and then we might not need to meet. But if I've gone horribly awry from Claire's vision, then we can set up a meeting.
Okay.
Okay,
So
so
I'll send it out to Bill, Lily, Claire, and Camille to
right,
see if I was imagining what you were imagining.
great. That's super. Really appreciate that. Thank you. Feels like we got something done here, which is always a good time to stop a meeting. Oh, go ahead, Raymond.
So so one question I have for you, Bill, and I think it probably is best suited for you is, I know that one of the things that did come up, and I think this is probably more the broader perspective, is what type of timeline are you kind of wanting to focus on in relation to having this done? And then even further forecasting what type of timeline, I mean, because ultimately, I believe that this Forest Drive sector study is a part of the comp plan. And I think that the city's going to be starting their comp plan soon. And the goal or the hope is that this could be done prior to that so that it can kind of feed into it. So I think that I'm not certain, and I'm not trying to speak for Sally, but I know that we heard that. And so that might be another one of the things to kind of put into your thought process about the timeline of this.
Let me tell you what I have thought about that. It's an excellent question. Thanks for bringing it up. End of September 2020. Let me put it that way. Okay. Since we're dealing with the 2021 comp plan now. Yeah, but our charter basically from the city, the resolution takes us through October. Okay.
Okay.
And so I'm going to say end of September. Realistically, we may be in October. What I really don't want to do is I want our report pretty much done by the end of September. We may have to do some fine tuning and editing and so forth in October, but I don't want to have to deal with another resolution or a continuance of the resolution and all that stuff, unless we have to, and we will if we have to. And I've been assured we'll get it if we have to. But I'm interested in really now. We've done a lot of work. People have done a lot of work, and let's pull it together. So that's my thinking, Raymond. And that's plenty of time to figure out how that affects the sector study. And because the sector study dovetails into the comp plan. And both the county and the city are now working on their GDP and their comp plan. So the timing is good for us to get this out.
Bill, that email that I forwarded to you that had to do with that 2040 plan that the county is, I wondered if that was going to impact us in any way.
I don't know. I don't know, Camille. The 2040 plan. I mean, the county is has recently. Raymond knows more about this than I do, for sure.
Christina and I are actually two of the people who are working on that.
Right.
And that was something I was kind of waiting to the end here to announce that we have an online tool, and I think that's probably what you're talking about, Camille. There is, if you go to our website, a.org/plan2040, there's a link to a tool where we have put out a draft land use plan for the county. The tool also goes through a lot of the work that we have done with our advisory committee to date, or a vision for the county and goals and policies. A full draft plan, we are still working to pull all of that together, and we're aiming for late September for that. But a lot of the most important elements of the plan are available for viewing and commenting online right now. And so I'd love to have you all take a look at that.
Patrick, development policy area for Annapolis Neck is Peninsula.
Mm-hmm.
Could you do a presentation to us on what the county is thinking about for development policy? Because I am part of the Peninsula Coalition, and it seems like very similar to the peninsula principles. So I would like
Somewhat.
to understand what the county has already considered and is willing to consider, where the Peninsula Coalition is differing from the county's development policy that's entitled Peninsula.
Yep, I can pull together something on that.
Okay.
Christina, go ahead.
I just wanted to let you know that I put the link to our online open house is in the chat box. It's a very deep tool, so please take some time to look at it. There are about 7 tabs on the top, and then there's additional information for each tab on the left. There are links embedded in the language down the left column. So like if you want more information about how we arrived at our planned land use map, pull up the briefing paper. It's in a link. If you want to see every single goal, policy, and strategy that we have at this point, there's another link. It says click here. It's blue here. So there is a ton of information, plus all of our land use change applications. It's tremendously robust. I was actually walking a staff person from DPW through it tonight, and he was really amazed. So we'd love for you to get in there. There's SurveyMonkey surveys that are embedded. You can take those. We would love to have your input.
Great, thank you.
That's why I forwarded it on to Lily and Bill, because I thought, well, if we're coming up with our own recommendations, what if the county has other ideas for the Forest Drive sector? And I'm like, well, maybe we need to know what the county is doing versus what we're doing, you know? So
and just so you know, I've been meeting with Kristen Pauley, who's our representative for Annapolis Neck, Ellen Moyer, who's the city representative. And there is, the Peninsula Coalition is actually coming up with a guide to how to walk through this plan. And they're about through their 3rd review of just explaining to people how to attack it. Christina's right, it's very involved and thorough, and there's a very small window of time for the general public to understand what's going on and to make a comment. We are relying on our representatives that have been in this committee for what, a year or 2.
So
it'll help us if you really have something to say. And I'd like to talk about it at another meeting, but I'd really like a presentation on the Peninsula policy that you've already agreed.
We can do that. And just so you know, the open house tool it's going to be open to the public until September 10th. So you've got about a month from today to be able to get in there, take a look around, and make some comments. But after that, we are aiming to have a full draft of our comprehensive plan, our plan 24. We're aiming for the late November timeframe to release that to the public as well for review. So there is that opportunity.
Patrick, we're gonna have a draft a little bit sooner than that. There is going to be a draft that goes out for 30 days before a planning advisory board, which I think should be out late September, early October.
Yeah, I said late September.
You said November.
Oh, did I? Oh, okay. No, so, okay. Thank you. Good catch.
I was like, oh God, I hope the paper's not here.
Thank you.
No, it's really late September, early October.
All right.
Patrick, since you're on the task force, our task force, and you're also involved in this other county plan, you're familiar with what our present document says. So are there any conflicts that you see? Is there any concerns that we should have as a task force when it comes to the Forest Drive corridor? You know, so that we're on the same page, I guess?
I don't think so. I think it will help, as Lily has asked for, to talk about the Peninsula policy area and what that mean for the peninsula, and also get into a little bit of the goals and policies surrounding that. And then also I can talk a little bit about the planned land use in the Annapolis Neck area. So I can sort of get into a little bit of that with you all, maybe at the next meeting if you'd like, Bill.
Sure, absolutely. Why don't you plan on that, Patrick? And let's just do 20 minutes at the front end.
Okay.
Would you need more than that? I'm going to presume that everybody's now got this link, and please take the time between now and the next meeting of the task force to review that and to get into that material so that it's not completely new. Is that fair, Patrick? Can we, do you need more
Yes.
time than that, or is that okay?
I can work with that.
Okay.
Do we have a date already, Bill?
No, I'm thinking 3 weeks from today, whatever that is. Is that the,
So 1, 2, the 3rd of September.
is that the, okay, that's
The
the
3rd of September is before Labor Day. Labor Day is the 7th.
Yeah, okay, 3rd of September.
I have a planning commission, no wait, September 3rd. I might have a planning commission meeting that night. I was thinking maybe September 1st, although there might be a Board of Appeals meeting. Can I check if we want it on the Zoom calendar? I have to find nights where there's no other city meetings.
Yeah, that I forgot. Yes.
Those are
Okay.
both possible because both of those meetings might not happen, but I'm not sure. I think the 1st is probably the more likely night.
Well, sure, Sally, I forgot, we're now on the city platform for these meetings. So let's just wait to hear, okay?
Okay.
What's available that week? Can we do it that way? See if we can,
The first week in September.
first week in September, guys, okay? And we'll pin down a date as soon as we get feedback from the city on what's available. Christina sent out the link. She mentioned that. Any other business for tonight? Thank you very much. Really appreciate your work. Thanks for attending this meeting. Stay safe, and we'll talk soon, okay?
Okay, bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Hi, everyone.